Hello everyone and welcome to the Not Only Running podcast. It's me, Jill, your host, and this is episode number 36. And today I'm here to talk about all things running workouts. You only have to look on the internet and you'll see tempo run, hill run, fartlek, interval, cruise intervals, HIIT session, steady state, easy run, recovery run, long run, marathon run. There's so many different names for runs out there. And the more names that there are, the more complicated it tends to be. And this particular topic is one that I cover in the Run Your Life program. And I very much just touch on it. And I am hoping in the very near future to kind of delve a little bit deeper and expand on that. But I wanted to come on today and just have a little bit of a chat about the different types of workouts that you might see listed, what they mean, and do they have a place even in your program? And the reality is that most sessions do have a time and place at some time in your training program, some more than others at specific times. So the most common ones that are used by endurance athletes, and probably the most common one, is we can call it steady state or continuous or non-stop running. There's no getting away from it. If you are a middle or long distance runner and you're running distances in excess of 5 kilometers, the bulk of your training, and I sometimes feel that people are going to get really bored with me listening to it, but the bulk of your running should be easy. Research is all pointing towards that 80% of your total running volume should be easy, regardless really of what that looks like. And the other 20 should be made up with other little fillers that will encourage improvements in things like your central nervous system, muscle fiber recruitment, fast twitch muscles, running form, and good biomechanics when it comes to increasing intensity, such as sprint training. But the bulk of your running, because that's what you're going to be doing on race day, should be at that steady state, prolonged run, non-stop running, if that's what you want to call it. So those there elicit some really good adaptation that we need in order to run in terms of physiology. They increase capillaries, they help increase the rate at which we oxidize fat, which means we can go for longer. There's mitochondrial concentration, all of those increase. Our tolerance and our ability to buffer things like lactate also increase with this type of training. We often dismiss it because it doesn't give us the buzz, or we might be thinking, oh, it's too easy. And to be fair, it is meant to be easy, and it's easy for a reason. I often find that most people think that running should be hard, or oh, when you're running, it's always easy. It's never really pushing you. Well, there is a time and a place when you want to be pushed, but at the end of the day, when you're doing long distance running, it's not all about pushing, okay? Sometimes it needs to be easy running. Easy running helps you achieve more volume in the week, and we know that if you're able to handle more volume, that positively correlates with faster finish times. You cannot get the same mileage in a week if you're constantly doing tempo work or threshold training, interval training, fartlek training, or hill repetitions. You cannot get the miles in with that. The stress would be way too much for your body, and it will be a different conversation that we're having. So that aside, and outside of the 80% of the runs that you would be doing, which is the steady state running, where you're working aerobically, it is very, very comfortable. On an RPE scale, it's like a 2 to 3. It's where the heart rate is sitting relatively low. The other types of runs that are going to help at certain times are efforts such as tempo or threshold training. The other type is going to be fartlek training, interval training, and or hill repetitions. What I want to do is kind of just look at each one of those and maybe just give a little bit of context and an example of what they are and why you might want to use them. Touched a little bit on what steady state training is, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because I literally probably do have my whole Instagram account around what is zone 2 running, what is what, and so forth as well. But as I said, so long steady duration running or recovery running is massively important for your development if you are a middle or long distance runner. So if we are looking specifically at tempo training, Okay, well, we want to see like what is that? So it is a form of training that was something that was similarly developed by a guy called Charlie Francis many years, well, not many years ago, but like, maybe 20, 30 years ago. And it can also be referred to as threshold training. But regardless of whatever one that you use, they both really refer to long sustained efforts. And normally our threshold would be something that we can sustain for approximately 1 hour. So if we're looking at a tempo or a threshold run, we're probably looking at a training duration between 10 and or anywhere up to 60 minutes. This type of training involves exercising slightly above their lactate threshold, or what might be more commonly used or more specifically used is maximum lactate steady state, or MLSS, if you've ever seen it written down or so forth. And that there is where you are training sort of just above or outside of your comfort zone. And you shouldn't be able to get too many words out within that. And it should be quite challenging. And so forth. So the main purpose of that there is obviously to raise exercise threshold so that you as a runner can perform at a higher intensity before blood lactate starts to accumulate at a rate that is going to start to slow you down. So these here runs do play an effective part in your training, because obviously the faster we can buffer lactate, the more tolerant we are to it, then the faster and more intense that we can work. And these are normally tested in sort of a lab or a field test. And most notably, they also can be correlated with your athlete's heart rate as well. And when it comes to like the intensity at which both kind of the lactate threshold and maximum lactate steady state occurs, it's very individual, and it's something that constantly changes, obviously, the better we get, or if we take time off, etc. So it's important to kind of recognize that as well. And if we are looking at example workouts of threshold runs, it could be working anywhere for a one-off consistent pace of anywhere between 30 minutes, like a 30-minute tempo run. More often than not, we can split these up as well. When we split them up, what we can do is we can actually work at a higher intensity, and then as a result, we'll develop that. So we're maybe looking at possibly maybe 3 sets of 10 minutes tempo with a 1 to 3 minute break in between. Or alternative to that there, you can, it's quite commonly seen that you can inject surges into your longer runs, anywhere between 20 and 30 seconds, which will in essence start to increase the lactate that we're holding within the system, and as such, hopefully aiming to develop our lactate threshold. So as I say, guys, those types of runs, they can be continuous, non-stop, they can be split up, it could be surges, or it could be something like unders and overs or alterations, where you're running a set distance or time at your threshold, and then you're resting for the same amount in terms of distance or time, or something that's active. And what you're doing is kind of like it's almost like a lactate shuttle, where we're increasing lactate and then buffering it out, and all with the goal of just increasing that tolerance as we move forward. The next type of running that we're going to look at is fartlek training. Fartlek meaning speed play. And it is a free form running. And what I mean by that is it incorporates both high intensity and low intensity bouts in a variety of different durations. Often referred to as random training, but there sometimes can be a bit of an underlying structure to it. And at the end of the day, each run will have a focus that they want to derive out of it. In fartlek training, it was developed I believe in Sweden. There was an athlete there, Gunder Hägg and Arne Andersson, in the 1940s. They kind of brought about this type of training. And it is a hybrid of continuous training that's in some type of interval fashion. But as I said, there can be different intensities used in it. There can be different durations, distances, times. And it is quite an effective training plan or training session to improve things like your VO2 max, lactate threshold, running economy, fat utilization. And more often than not, I often find that it's probably people find it the most enjoyable because it's varied, it's interesting, it can be fun. And examples of that can be, as I said, if it's mixed, it can be 2 sets of 90 seconds, resting the same. It could then move into shorter bites of effort, 4 sets of 15. So there is a workout that is, it's called the Mona fartlek. If your name's Mona and you're listening to this here, it's 2 sets of 90, 2 sets of 60, 4 sets of 30, 4 sets of 15, all with equal recovery in between. And that is a popular fartlek training program. So if you want to do it, you can definitely try that there. If you type in Mona fartlek, that there is the session. The next type of training is interval training. And I think that we're all very familiar with that. I would say that fartlek kind of gave rise to this. Interval training was developed shortly after. And basically interval training is repeated bouts of work and rest. And normally they're quite consistent. So that can be anything from, 10 sets of 400s or 5 sets of 400s, etc., etc. Each one, again, in itself will have a set focus with what you're wanting to achieve out of. The ways in which interval training can be structured can be done in many different ways, such as just a standard workout, which is what I just said there, maybe 5 sets of 400. It can be done in a ladder format, so you're working for 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, 4 minute, 5 minute, or reversing that and coming back down. It can be pyramid style, where there is an increase or a decrease. So increasing pyramid or decreasing pyramid, for example, 400 meters, 800, 1200, and then 800, 400 and coming back down again. And then we could have a combination of those as well. It could be anything from a 15-minute run at lactate threshold and then adding on some sprint efforts of 4 sets of 100 at the end or so forth. These are a very popular workout, obviously, for developing things such as your running economy, your lactate threshold, and really just developing perhaps even the shorter distances. Your interval training can also be extensive or intensive intervals. Again, just that's really dependent on the type of volume that they are. So extensive intervals involve a larger volume of work, but with that, the intensity will be slightly lower. So for example, if you're doing 5 sets of 1 mile effort, they might be held, maybe just under 10k pace or so forth. And then you'll have intensive intervals. And this is where you'll find that the volume is lower, but the intensity is high. And that's when you're looking at efforts such as 10 sets of 200, maybe perform close to your 1 mile or your 3k pace. Regardless of whatever way you're doing them, again, intervals can be a challenging run in themselves, but again, in the right dose and at the right time in your program. The final type of training that might fall under intervals are things like hill efforts as well. Hills are fantastic. Hills are a great way of improving running economy, the sort of your running efficiency, also running technique. It really does require you to, do all the correct things to make you run more efficiently with having a change in the incline underneath the feet. And with that, that you can identify what you want to achieve out of it and what you want to target. They can be ran for endurance, where you're running for maybe slightly longer over a period of time at a lower intensity, or maybe you're doing shorter bout efforts where you're focusing more on like the speed development side of things. So when you're doing speed intervals on a hill, you're looking for a more of a gradual hill, and then for more endurance efforts, maybe taking longer, maybe just focusing on traveling up a steeper hill, whatever that might look like. And the last one I want to talk about, and it mightn't be something that is maybe common to many, but if you've trained for a marathon, you'll more often or not see like marathon pace workouts, and those would be called kind of like specific endurance bouts. These efforts or these interval styles where you're doing marathon pace would probably happen after you've done a bout of interval training that might be at a harder effort. And these here specific endurance are very much devised to help you develop experience at your race pace, also develop intolerance at it, where you can accumulate a bit of volume in that as well, especially in the shorter distances. But again, they would be another type of workout that you would fall under as well. I have in the past posted on my Instagram, these sessions in a written format. So if you do go back a little while ago, you will see them there as well. But this is obviously a voice behind them if you're more of an audible learner, or you enjoy listening to a podcast when you're out. But I hope that this has has proven helpful for you and you have a bit more understanding of what the different types of runs out there are, how they might be structured, what they're for, and obviously in the dose. And again, just to recap that if you're a distance runner, use that 80-20 rule. 80%, keep it nice and easy, build the distance, get the volume in, keep the intensity low, develop that big base, and then the other 20% is kind of where the magic happens with all of the other stuff that I know that we secretly love to hate and wish we could do all the time. But I suppose like everything in life, everything in moderation, you know. Until next time, guys, I hope you have a really great day.